we have green technology, let's all share so we can develop all off from it. We think that disparity among capabilities is only reduced and is only able to be reduced under an international mechanism of legal binding power. But thirdly and mostly, so after we do this, after we have all countries unilaterally sign under a legal binding target international agreement, what happens? We believe that by ratifying this policy is setting a target. Now, when you have a clear target, it means you're going to have actions, policies, and procedures in achieving that target. What do actual actions achieve? It's achievement of goals. When you don't have a specific target, like how much percent of carbon dioxide you're going to reduce, or how much percent of degree that you're going to reduce in the globe, you simply do not have the specific steps towards that step. That's why MDG, Millennium Development Goals, is actually praised because it was setting 10 principles and 10 specific goals that the United Nations as a whole was going to work towards. We believe the same applies for international climate change. That when you have a target, you take actions specifically. Why is this fact important? Because we think only when actions are taken, achievements occur. And why is this mechanism of achievement occurring important? Because this is what stabilizes the international community as a whole. And this is what empowers the international community as a whole. Because right now, Madam Speaker, or Mr. Speaker, we see a disparity of superpowers. Some countries doing things because simply they have more money or they have more military. But we tell you, when we have a strong international mechanism and precedent regarding climate change, we see future development in other areas of human rights, of international development, of economic disparity. We tell you, only when legal binding mechanisms expand to further spheres can our international community develop as a whole and be strengthened as a whole. Because ultimately, we live in a globe with 200-something countries. If we do not have all these countries under the same principle, how are we as planet Earth able to develop into the next level? So for those very reasons, we're very proud to propose this motion.
Thank Member of Government for her speech, and I'd like to welcome the Member of Opposition from ICU 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very disappointed in this Korean debate of how the opening government has never been able to provide us a mechanism on which why new and important conferences would be done, and how new treaties would be signed when you make people who don't want to sign in the treaty join, ladies and gentlemen. We think in the end this is going to be counterproductive to the protection of the environment, and I'm going to provide extensions on that. We think the government fails on this ground because the principal justification of this air proposal is that there is going to be environmental benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that is absolutely untrue, and I'm going to tell you why that is. So, ladies and gentlemen, 3 points of extension. Firstly, I'm going to tell you how we can actually achieve cooperation under our model. And secondly, I'm going to tell you why the cooperation of the status quo is going to be actually hindered by taking their proposal. And lastly, why we think that economic growth is necessary in order to make sure that transfers of technology and these kind of things would actually reach the developing world and in this global economy. But before going into these things, I'm going to give a couple of rebuttals to what we heard so far from the closing government. Now, basically the first part of the extension was that this is a very urgent problem. Ladies and gentlemen, well, the thing is, what we are going to say is that unless you take the right process of negotiations and make sure that people will voluntarily join in these treaties, we think in the future this is going to be counterproductive. Secondly, they have told us that technology transfers is going to be possible when you have every nation cooperating. Firstly, we say that bilateral treaties is going to be enough all the time, as we see how there has been agreements between countries like Sweden and Denmark. And also we think that this kind of technology of transfers is going to be impossible if they take their model, and economy is going to be really bad. Now, having those notes sit down. So, the first extension, how do we achieve cooperation? Ladies and gentlemen, we think we can reach cooperation by creating role models where sustainable development is actually achievable, where growth and environmental protection can exist at the same time, ladies and gentlemen. Now, most states, we think, actually recognize the importance of environmental protection, but they want to develop because that's what their citizens want, and they have to make themselves accountable to these citizens. Now sit down. And that's why, in the status quo, they can only reach and join treaties when it is proven clearly, scientifically, that economic growth is actually achievable alongside with environmental protection. So what we see in the status quo is a great trend, ladies and gentlemen, when we see that the international community realizing the importance of sustainable development. For example, COP15, note it down, they think is actually a failure. We think it's a great thing because in COP15, every nation agreed on sustainable development under the slogan of common but separate responsibilities, which ensure sustainable development. That is why countries like China, countries like India actually agreed on it, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that this is important. So what's going to happen in a couple of years, ladies and gentlemen, is that China and India, or these nations which have agreed to it, are going to take on programs domestically and scientifically prove that their mechanisms is actually achieving achieving sustainable development when they can actually have both economic growth and developing at the same time. And only when it is scientifically proven, note it down, and you have role models and existing precedences on when that is possible, can other nations think about joining that treaty, ladies and gentlemen. This is because then they have no political capital to say, well, I'm not going to join in. No, sit down. Now, I think this is going to be destroyed, ladies and gentlemen, by taking this proposal, which is my second extension. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no, sit down. We think when you enforce other nations who want to develop at the same time as having environmental production to join these treaties, what's going to happen is that these people, in the first phase, maybe not join conferences because under the model, if you haven't joined in the discussion, you are not binding by it. But secondly, if these people join these process of treaty creation, note it down, I think that all the discussion in these international conferences are just going to be harmed and not reach any conclusion whatsoever. Because the discussion and the debate that goes on is going to be stagnant, ladies and gentlemen, because developing nations who want to develop are going to be very awkward in signing a treaty which has no scientific proof, note it down, of achieving growth for these people. And that is why we think this is going to be harmful, because their policy on their side of the house relies on the fact that treaties will be signed and will be created, ladies and gentlemen. We think that is going to be harmed. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, even if we can reach some agreement, it is going to be very weak agreements like Kyoto Protocol, ladies and gentlemen. It has actually failed with having 80% of the ratifying nation actually increasing CO2 emissions over the last 20 years, ladies and gentlemen. And we think by having an existing treaty, it harms the creation of a new treaty as well. We see this because we see it in places like the Treaty on Conservation of Tunas, ladies and gentlemen. You have one international agreement, and countries like Japan, I'm sorry, claim that because we have one treaty, why do we need another one, ladies and gentlemen? That's why the protection of tuna is not working. Note it down. And having a very weak standard of environmental protection created once, that is going to harm future negotiations. And we think that is harmful because in the end, you need a lot of things because you don't know what kind of disasters are going to happen in the future, and that is a harmful closing.
Okay, the fact that Kyoto failed is because not a lot of countries ratified it. The principle behind it was giving a different timeline to different countries, so sustainable development was possible. Prove to us how that's not possible under an international mechanism.
No, we have proven to you when we see that some nations, like the ones who joined Japan, Kyoto, if they actually made sure that they actually did reduce CO2 emission, other nations would see it as a good thing and join in, ladies and gentlemen. And we think it's the fault of these people, it is the fault of Kyoto Protocol, not that everybody, not many nations joined in. To my third extension about the economy, ladies and gentlemen, opening opposition told us how this actually harms development in the developing world. What we add is that some nations are just not capable of reducing CO2 emissions, ladies and gentlemen, because CO2 emission reduction takes a lot of money and time, and some nations are just so poor that they can't do it. And what happens is that because we live in an intertwined economy, harm the economy in the developing world harms the development of the global world, ladies and gentlemen, because they produce cheap goods which is exported to our world. And what happens when the economy of the advanced world goes down is that there's going to be less investment in these kind of fields of transfer, of creating technology and so on. This is the harm we are not going to bear. And at the end of the day, we think this policy is absolutely counterproductive. And therefore, none of the government side can win this debate because they just haven't solved the problem that they have proposed. Thank you.
Thank the member of opposition, and may I now welcome the government with.
Mr. Speaker, I was quite confused with the closing opposition, as they seem to actually argue for our case, arguing for sustainable development, and then like every country has different target and different situations, so therefore international mechanism will work. And thankfully, they mentioned CDR, common but differentiated responsibility, saying that yes, international treaties and international conventions do recognize common but differentiated responsibility, and that is the whole point. My member has told you how international treaties will actually, under the same goal, will give different targets and allow different approaches to achieve that goal. And we think under that model, sustainable development or economic development of developing countries are 100% achievable, unlike what the closing opposition argue. So as the government whip, we have 3 questions to address to you. The first question is climate change an urgent issue that overrides sovereignty issue? And the second question that I have is international approach better, or the approach that opposition is proposing to you is better? And the third question that I would like to discuss will be the impact of the action that were taken by the government side. And having that said, let me take a look at what the closing opposition has brought to our table. They talk about how sustainable development won't be possible. That is important. Mr. Speaker, I already told you how that we can actually set goals to achieve sustainable development under international treaties. We actually have talked a lot about sustainable development in every international